On March 8, 1976, in Moston, Manchester, 17-year-old Sharon Mossoff had a rare night out as she was usually watching her four younger sisters. On the way home, she got lost and she called her father, who told her what bus she needed to catch. After she didn't arrive home that night, a massive search ensued. The next morning, her body was found in the Rochdale Canal in Failsworth, as it was initially thought to be a suicide. But as the police approached, they quickly changed their theory. Her body was badly mutilated and evidence showed that she had been strangled. And even more alarming, one of her nipples was bitten off. She was the latest victim of an absolute monster terrorizing the city. Welcome to history's biggest villains. Trevor Hardy was born on June 11, 1945 in Manchester, England, the second of four children. Early on, it was clear that Trevor was the black sheep of his family, and his troublesome behavior started early in his youth, and his own father, who was extremely strict, was afraid of him. At 8 years old, teachers were writing home saying that he was bullying other students, and he would often escape his house to roam the streets. He would shoplift and steal from fruit stands. He also had a reputation of breaking into people's houses. As a teenager, he began to resort to violent crime, randomly shooting people he saw with his air rifle. His actions ostracized his family from the community. His brother Colin wouldn't even be invited to other children's birthday parties because of the notoriety of Trevor. After escaping from several boarding schools, he was sent to prison at age 15 for theft and burglary, as well as 20 other charges. The judge sentenced him to a 12-month sentence in order to protect the public. He was the youngest prisoner ever in the UK. His mother believed that his violent nature was the result of a head injury where a chip of bone from his skull would press against his brain, encouraging his violent behavior. Again, I don't know how true that is, that's just what his mom said. As Trevor grew up, he always kept a group of teenagers around that he would commit petty crimes with. In his late 20s, he developed a friendship with a 14-year-old girl named Beverly Driver. Although she saw him as a father figure, he became romantically obsessed with her. Hardy established himself through putting fear in other people, whether it be through stabbing or by bar fights. In 1972, he got into a petty argument in the bar with his friend Stanley O'Brien over who would be purchasing the next round of drinks. Trevor snapped and attacked Stanley with a pickaxe, striking him multiple times in the head. I don't know why you're just carrying a pickaxe in a bar, but okay. Stanley was left paralyzed after the attack and could never work again. On February 5, 1972, he was convicted of attempted murder and sentenced to 5 years in prison. In later interviews, he said that he sat in his cell, ruminating about finishing Stanley off for good, but before he was released on bail only 3 years later, Stanley died from his injuries, but no further charges were brought against Hardy. On July 19, 1975, 18-year-old Wanda Scola was walking home after a shift as a barmaid at the Lightbound Hotel in Moston, Manchester. She had taken this route several times, and she was less than a mile away from her house before Hardy attacked her. Her body was discovered the next morning at the edge of a building site covered by rocks. The autopsy revealed that she had been strangled with her own socks. She had also been hit in the head with a brick several times, shattering her skull. There were several bite marks on the body, and her nipple was bitten off. While the investigation was ongoing, Trevor called his brother Colin, who had distanced himself from Trevor, to come to the pub, where he drunkenly admitted to Colin that he had killed Wanda Scola. Obviously floored by this statement, Colin did what any smart person would do. He let Trevor and his girlfriend Sheila stay at his apartment. However, when they got home and Trevor started to sober up, he regretted telling his brother what he had done, so he viciously assaulted Colin, even stomping on his head while he was on the floor unconscious. He then instructed Colin's girlfriend to make him beans on toast, which she did out of fear for her own safety. The following day, Colin reported Trevor's confession to the police and he was arrested. In an effort to stop police from matching his teeth to the bite marks on Wanda Scola's body, he smuggled a nail file into his cell and filed his teeth down. Literally insane. The case against Hardy was damaged even more when his partner Sheila offered a false alibi for him, saying that he was with her on the night of Wanda's murder, so the police had no choice but to let him go. After he was released, Trevor attacked Colin, but only received a suspended sentence. 5 months after he killed Wanda Scola, he was named a local hero in the newspaper for saving a family from a house fire, but later it emerged that he had set the fire himself. Classic. On March 8, 1976, 17-year-old Sharon Massow was found dead in a canal on Moston. She showed a lot of similarities with Wanda Scola's murder. They both had clothing wrapped around their neck, they had both been savagely beaten, and they both had their nipples bitten off, and police started to make connections. The walls were closing in on Trevor. An arrest for a brutal assault on a woman in a bar didn't serve him well either, as there were multiple witnesses. They had gotten into an argument at the pub when he dragged the woman into the bathroom, grabbing her by the throat so hard that she bit her tongue, only running away when he was stopped by someone at the bar. Hardy was able to hide away for 2 months before his ex-girlfriend Sheila, the same girlfriend that helped him avoid a murder charge, admitted to police that she had given a false alibi and she was put under surveillance. When Hardy visited her house, he was arrested in May 1976. He was arrested on suspicion of the murders of Wanda Scola and Sharon Massow. 3 months later, he confessed to the murder of a third girl, 15-year-old Leslie Stewart. She had been reported missing from the suburb Newton Heath 7 months before Wanda Scola's murder. She was only a missing persons case up until Hardy's confession. She officially went missing on December 31st, 1974, and her disappearance wasn't linked to the two girls. On that night, she had been dropped off in the area and was on the way to meet her boyfriend at a party. But Hardy was lurking in the shadows, and he had mistaken her for his former teenage crush Beverly. He was consumed with revenge after she cut him off during one of his prison stints. After Leslie exited the car, the driver said, "Good night, Leslie," but Hardy mistook that for the word Beverly. He shouted to her, "Hey, Beverly," and when she turned around, he stabbed her in the throat. After watching her bleed to death, he brought her to a secluded area, buried her in a shallow grave, before walking home to watch TV with his mother. It has been said that on the way home from his prison stint after the pickaxe attack on his friend Stanley, he was heard muttering two names to himself over and over, O'Brien and Beverly. He even threw an axe through Beverly's window, but fortunately, she wasn't home. Hardy offered to take police to the burial site, and even after 2 years, he perfectly recalled all of his attempts to hide her body. The first instance, he felt that he hadn't buried her deep enough, so he came back a few days later to bury her even deeper. But this was only the tip of the iceberg. The police also discovered that Leslie's body was in multiple pieces. Hardy decapitated her and threw her head in a lake. Then he returned to her body and cut off her feet and buried those in another location. He then began pulling her body apart with his bare hands and hid the parts in various locations. He boasted that all of this was in close proximity to a school and that the kids had seen him dismembering, burying, and even playing with her body parts. He even stole a ring off her finger and gave it to his girlfriend Sheila as a love token. In April 1977, Hardy was sentenced to 3 life sentences with a minimum of 30 years in prison. He received a whole life tariff, one of only 50 British prisoners to ever receive such a sentence. Manchester locals had long suspected Hardy in the 1971 murder of 17-year-old Dorothy Layden, and in 2004 her family requested that the Greater Manchester Police re-examine old evidence. Detectives that reviewed the cold case believed that forensic evidence eliminated Hardy as a suspect in the murder of Layden, as DNA samples that were examined more than 30 years after her murder were found not to match Hardy. Hardy collapsed in his cell in Wakefield Prison on September 23, 2012 after suffering a heart attack. He died in the hospital 2 days later at 67 years old. He had spent 35 years in prison and was one of the longest serving prisoners in England and Wales. I don't know, when I was reviewing this case, I watched a couple documentaries, and I'm just thinking about, this man was literally destined to be just an outlaw criminal type. From the earliest moments, he was already showing signs of delinquency from the earliest moments. The fact that you not only kill somebody, the fact that you continue to go back to the body multiple times and dismember the body parts and then pull the body parts apart and then take a ring off of a dead girl's finger and give it to your girlfriend. So now every time you see that ring, it reminds him of the murder that he committed. What? Oh my God. This dude was just literally psychotic his whole life. And the crazy part is, he's overshadowed by the Yorkshire Ripper, because as soon as he went to jail, this is when the Yorkshire Ripper started killing women too. So his story really gets swept underneath the rug because of all the media attention that the Yorkshire Ripper got. But this man is equally as dangerous and equally as psychotic. My next two stories are going to be pretty good. Next one is going to be on Mary Bell, who is a 10-year-old girl who killed two young boys, basically two toddlers, and who got to live a normal life after she got out of prison. And also Thierry Paulin, a Frenchman who, along with his male lover, would break into old women's homes and rob them and kill them. His story is really unique, really just crazy. But thank you for listening to the story. If you enjoyed it, leave a like. If you are new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. You know what I mean? Thank you so much for the support. But anyways, be safe, stay on the grind. I'm out. Peace.